On May 13, 2023, a teenager was inside a shopping area in Asheville, North Carolina. To most people around her, she looked like any other teenager. But one person recognized something. The face looked familiar. Not because the girl was famous, because the person who saw her had seen the face of a missing child. 6 years earlier, 9-year-old Kayla Unbehaun had disappeared from Illinois. Her photograph had been circulated for years. An age-progressed image had been released. Her story had appeared on television. And now, in Asheville, someone believed they were looking at the girl from those images. Police were called. They investigated. And the suspicion was confirmed. The teenager was Kayla. She had been missing for nearly 6 years. Her mother, Heather Unbehaun, was arrested on an Illinois warrant connected to Kayla's abduction. Kayla was placed into protective care before being reunited with her father. The discovery was extraordinary because it did not come from a dramatic police chase or a forensic breakthrough. It began with recognition. Someone saw a teenager and remembered a little girl who had disappeared years earlier. And that moment finally answered the question that had followed Kayla's family since the summer of 2017. Where was Kayla Unbehaun? Before we go further, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city in the comments. Kayla's case crossed state lines, and it was ultimately a person in another state who recognized her story. To understand why that recognition mattered so much, we have to go back to the beginning. Kayla Unbehaun was 9 years old when she disappeared in July 2017. She lived in the South Elgin, Illinois area with her father, Ryan Iskirka. Her parents were no longer together, and custody arrangements had been the subject of court proceedings. According to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, Ryan had full legal custody of Kayla when she disappeared, while Kayla's mother, Heather Unbehaun, did not have custody of her. The circumstances surrounding that custody arrangement are important because this was not initially treated as a conventional stranger abduction case. Investigators believed Kayla had been taken by someone she knew, her own mother. NCMEC identifies Kayla as having been abducted by her non-custodial mother from South Elgin, Illinois, on July 5, 2017. The distinction between a stranger taking a child and a parent taking a child without legal authority can make these cases particularly complicated. There may be no obvious forced entry, no unknown vehicle, no stranger approaching a child in public. The missing child may simply fail to arrive at the expected time, and that is what happened in Kayla's case. In early 2017, Ryan had been granted full custody of his daughter. Heather still had visitation. The arrangement meant that Kayla could spend time with her mother, but she was expected to return to her father. That legal framework became central to everything that followed. In July, Kayla was with Heather around the 4th of July holiday. The two were reportedly expected to return to the normal custody arrangement afterward. But July 5 arrived, and Kayla did not come home. Ryan went to the Wheaton residence where he expected to pick up his daughter. Kayla was not there. Heather was not there either. According to later reporting, members of Heather's family told Ryan that Heather and Kayla had gone away on what was described as a camping trip. The problem was that Kayla was supposed to be returned. She wasn't. And suddenly, a normal custody exchange had become something much more serious. Police were contacted. Kayla was reported missing. A search began. At that moment, investigators had to work with limited information. They knew the child's name. They knew what she looked like. They knew she had been with her mother. And they knew the mother had not returned her as expected. But they did not know where either of them had gone. A felony warrant for Heather Unbehaun was issued later that month, according to reporting on the case. The search expanded beyond Illinois. One of the early concerns was that Heather had connections outside the state. Authorities publicly considered possible locations where mother and daughter might have gone. The case was no longer simply about finding a missing 9-year-old in a local community. Investigators were looking across state lines, and that changed the nature of the search. because every day that passed created another possibility. A child could move. A family could relocate. A photograph could become outdated. And the 9-year-old girl investigators were looking for would eventually become a teenager. That is one of the hardest parts of long-term missing child investigations. The photograph people remember is frozen in time. The child is not. Kayla's appearance would change. Her face would mature. Her hair could change. Her height would change. Her voice would change. Anyone trying to recognize her years later would need to remember that the 9-year-old in the original photograph would not necessarily look like the teenager standing in front of them. That is why NCMEC created an age-progressed image of Kayla. In January 2020, NCMEC released an age progression showing what Kayla might look like as she grew older. The image was more than a new photograph. It was an attempt to bridge two different versions of the same person, the little girl who had disappeared, and the teenager she might become. For Kayla's family, the years continued. 2017 became 2018, 2018 became 2019, then 2020, then 2021, then 2022. Each year meant another birthday without knowing exactly where Kayla was. The case was not forgotten. Her photograph remained part of missing child awareness efforts. NCMEC continued to include her case in its work. And people who knew about the disappearance continued to share information. But there was no confirmed recovery. No public reunion. No definitive answer. Now that you know who Kayla Unbehaun was, and why her disappearance mattered, what does her story make you think about? Tell me in the comments. Keeping a missing child's name visible can matter years after the original disappearance. The search also reached television. Kayla's disappearance was featured on In Pursuit with John Walsh, helping bring the case to a national audience. Reporting at the time described authorities as seeking information about Kayla and Heather, and noted the possibility that they could be outside Illinois. But television exposure did not immediately solve the case. The years kept moving, and then another opportunity appeared. In 2022, Kayla's story was featured in Netflix's Unsolved Mysteries. The episode focused on parental abductions. Kayla's image was included, along with an age-progressed version showing how she might look years after her disappearance. That exposure mattered because it placed Kayla's face in front of an entirely new audience. Someone watching the program might live hundreds of miles away from Illinois. Someone might never have heard her name before. Someone might remember her face. And that last possibility would eventually become critical. But first, there were still months of uncertainty. Kayla remained missing. Her father continued to wait. The family continued to hope. And investigators still had an open case. There is a temptation in stories like this to fill those years with assumptions, to imagine where Kayla was, to claim what her life looked like, to describe conversations that were never publicly documented. But the verified record does not give us a complete day-by-day account of Kayla's life during those 6 years. And because Kayla was a child, that boundary matters. There is a difference between what investigators established and what people might imagine. What can be established is that Kayla was eventually located alive in Asheville, North Carolina. And that discovery came because someone recognized her. The case had crossed from Illinois to North Carolina. That distance was one of the reasons public awareness was so important. A local missing child poster can reach a community. A television program can reach a country. And in Kayla's case, the person who eventually recognized her was in Asheville. Nearly 6 years after the disappearance, the case suddenly moved again. It was May 13, 2023. Kayla was 15 years old. She was in Asheville. Someone at a shopping center recognized her from widely circulated media about the case. According to the Asheville Police Department's account, reported by ABC, the person contacted police after suspecting that the teenager was the missing Kayla Unbehaun. Officers then consulted with South Elgin police and worked to confirm the identity. This is where the years of public awareness became tangible. The original photographs had shown a 9-year-old. The age progression had attempted to show what she might look like later. The television appearances had carried the story to people who might otherwise never have encountered it. And now someone made the connection. Police arrived. The information was checked. The identity was confirmed. The missing child had been found, alive, after nearly 6 years. At the same time, authorities arrested Heather Unbehaun. She was taken into custody in Asheville on the Illinois warrant. At the time, she was facing a charge related to Kayla's abduction, and authorities began the process that would eventually return the case to Illinois. Kayla was placed into protective care in North Carolina. The South Elgin Police Department later said she was in good condition and good spirits. And then came the moment Kayla's family had been waiting for: reunion. After 6 years apart, Kayla was reunited with her father. Her father, Ryan Iskirka, released a statement through NCMEC. He said he was overjoyed that Kayla was home safe. He thanked the South Elgin Police Department, NCMEC, and other law enforcement agencies that assisted with the case. He also thanked people who had followed the Bring Kayla Home effort and helped keep Kayla's story visible. And then he asked for something understandable after such a long separation: privacy. He said the family needed time to get to know each other again and navigate their new beginning. That sentence is important, because finding a missing child does not mean that everything immediately becomes simple. For almost 6 years, Kayla had been away from the life she had known before. Her father had lived through those years without knowing where his daughter was. Kayla had grown from 9 to 15. The reunion was not the end of the emotional story. It was the beginning of another chapter. NCMEC later described the situation as a journey of healing for the family. That is a more accurate way to understand what happened next. A missing child recovery is not simply a moment when a police officer checks a box and closes a file. It is a family coming back together after years that cannot be recovered. And in Kayla's case, there was another major development still to come. The criminal case against Heather Unbehaun continued. After being returned to Illinois, Unbehaun faced the child abduction case there. The legal process took time. For the purposes of a responsible true crime account, it is important to distinguish between an accusation and a conviction. For years, Heather had been described as the alleged abductor because that was the accusation underlying the warrant and criminal case. Then, in August 2025, the case changed. Heather Unbehaun pleaded guilty to child abduction in Kane County, Illinois. The plea came as jury selection was about to begin. According to NCMEC, she changed her plea to guilty shortly before the trial was set to proceed. That guilty plea changed the legal status of the case. The allegation was no longer simply an accusation awaiting trial. There was now a guilty plea. But the court still had to determine the sentence. Heather faced the possibility of prison time. Instead, on October 8, 2025, Kane County Judge David Clement sentenced her to 2 years of probation. She was also ordered to wear a GPS monitor for 6 months beyond the probation period, and she was ordered to have no contact with Kayla. The judge could have imposed a prison sentence of up to 3 years. The sentence became the final major legal development publicly documented in the case. For Kayla, however, the most important development had happened more than 2 years earlier. She had been found. The question that had defined her childhood was finally answered. She was alive, and she was home. For years, Kayla Unbehaun's family waited, without knowing where she was. If you've ever had to wait for an answer that mattered deeply to you, you can share that experience in the comments. Keep the focus on hope and on the people who are still waiting for their loved ones. The Kayla Unbehaun case also raises a broader question about family abductions. What happens when the person accused of taking a child is not a stranger? What happens when it is a parent? NCMEC has described family abductions as a significant category of missing child cases. In a 2026 article about family abductions, NCMEC specifically used Kayla's case as an example. The organization wrote that Ryan reported Kayla missing in 2017 after Heather failed to return her following court-ordered visitation. NCMEC also reported that Kayla and Heather had spent most of the time in Oregon before eventually moving to North Carolina. The organization emphasized that family abduction cases can remain unresolved for years and that national exposure can be important when children are taken far from home. Kayla's story demonstrates that clearly. Her disappearance began in Illinois. Her recovery happened in North Carolina. And the clue that connected those two places came from public awareness. Someone recognized the story. That person made the call. Police investigated, and a missing child was located. The case also shows why age progression matters. A missing child photograph can become outdated very quickly. A 9-year-old does not remain 9 forever. By the time Kayla was found, she was 15. The face in the original missing person photograph and the teenager standing in Asheville were separated by 6 years of growth. The NCMEC's age progression was an attempt to close that gap. It gave the public a visual reference for what Kayla might look like, and that information was available when someone needed to recognize her. The role of television is also difficult to ignore. Kayla had appeared on In Pursuit with John Walsh years earlier. Then her case appeared on Netflix's Unsolved Mysteries in 2022. NCMEC had maintained her case and released an age progression. The family had maintained public awareness efforts. Each piece alone might not have been enough, but together they created a chain. The name, the photograph, the age progression, the television exposure, the memory of a missing child, then recognition, then a phone call, then police confirmation, then recovery. That is the chain that brought Kayla home. There is another part of the story that deserves attention. When Kayla was found, she was not a 9-year-old anymore. She was 15. The world she returned to was not exactly the same world she had left, and neither was she. That is why her father's request for privacy was so important. The public had spent years searching for Kayla. People wanted answers. People wanted to know where she had been. People wanted to know what happened. But Kayla was still a person, not simply the subject of a mystery. Her family asked for space to reconnect. That request should be respected. Later, NCMEC reported that Kayla was doing well. In August 2025, after Heather's guilty plea, NCMEC said Ryan and his wife Lisa reported that Kayla was thriving, making friends, and enjoying her senior year of high school. That update offers something different from the dramatic moment of her recovery. It gives us a glimpse of what came after. A teenager building a life, making friends, going to school, moving forward. And that is ultimately where the story belongs. Not only in the moment she disappeared, not only in the years when her photograph appeared on missing child databases, not only in the moment someone recognized her, but in the life that continued after she came home. The legal case against her mother is now resolved through the guilty plea and sentence. Heather Unbehaun was convicted through that plea and received probation rather than a prison sentence. She was ordered to have no contact with Kayla. The criminal court process is therefore separate from the family relationship. The law determined the criminal consequence. Kayla's future is her own. And after everything that happened, that distinction matters. There were 6 years between the day Kayla disappeared and the day she was found. 6 years of birthdays. 6 years of photographs changing. 6 years of unanswered questions. 6 years when the people searching for her had to hold on to the possibility that she could still be somewhere. Then, on May 13, 2023, a person in Asheville saw something familiar. A missing girl's face. A story from television. A connection that could easily have been missed. But it wasn't. The call was made. The police came. The identity was confirmed. And a 6-year search ended. We're at the moment that changed everything. Before you continue, what do you think was the key breakthrough in Kayla's case? The age-progressed images, the television exposure, or the person who recognized her? Put your answer in the comments. For Kayla's father, the recovery was the beginning of a new life with a daughter he had not seen for years. For investigators, it was the resolution of a long-running missing child case. For NCMEC, it became another example of why public awareness matters. And for the person who recognized Kayla, it became a decision that changed a family's life. There is something powerful about that final part. The person who recognized Kayla did not need to be a detective. They did not need access to police databases. They did not need specialized technology. They simply needed to remember a face. They had seen information about a missing child, and when the opportunity came, they paid attention. That does not mean every missing person case can be solved this way. Most missing children do not have such a straightforward public breakthrough. But Kayla's case demonstrates the value of keeping missing children's names and faces visible, because sometimes a case that seems frozen is not actually finished. Sometimes the person who holds the missing piece has never met the investigators. Sometimes the clue is not sitting inside a police evidence room. Sometimes it is inside the memory of an ordinary person who has seen a photograph. Kayla's disappearance also reminds us that a missing child can grow into a missing teenager. That means the search has to evolve too. The image must change. The information must remain visible. And the public must understand that the child they are looking for may no longer look exactly like the photograph from years earlier. That is why NCMEC's age progression was so significant. It transformed a 6-year-old memory into something closer to a 15-year-old possibility. And in Asheville, someone made the connection. The story began with a custody arrangement. It became a missing child investigation. It crossed state lines. It remained unresolved for years. It appeared on television. It reached new audiences. A person recognized Kayla. Police confirmed her identity. Her mother was arrested. Kayla was placed into protective care, and then she was reunited with her father. 2 years later, the criminal case ended with a guilty plea and a sentence of probation. The story of Kayla Unbehaun is therefore not an unsolved mystery anymore. The central question has an answer. Kayla was found. And she survived the years when her family did not know where she was. There are still questions that the public may never have answers to. There are private experiences belonging to Kayla that should remain private. There are details that should not be turned into speculation simply to make a documentary more dramatic. A responsible telling of this case does not need those details. The verified facts are enough. A 9-year-old girl disappeared in 2017. Her mother, who did not have custody, failed to return her. A warrant was issued. The search continued for nearly 6 years. NCMEC kept her case visible. An age progression was released. Her story appeared on television. Netflix's Unsolved Mysteries featured her case. In May 2023, someone recognized her in Asheville, North Carolina. Police confirmed it was Kayla. She was 15. She was alive. Her mother was arrested. Kayla was reunited with her father. And in 2025, her mother pleaded guilty to child abduction and received 2 years of probation, along with monitoring and a no-contact order involving Kayla. Those are the facts that carry the weight of this story. Kayla does not need to be turned into a mystery. She was a child who disappeared. She became a teenager while missing, and she eventually came home. That is the part worth remembering. Because in missing child cases, the word found can sometimes sound like the end of a sentence. For the family, it can be the beginning of another one, a new routine, a new relationship, a new understanding of years that cannot be recovered. But there is one thing the family no longer has to do. They no longer have to ask, "Where is Kayla?" They know. Kayla Unbehaun was found in Asheville, North Carolina, nearly 6 years after she disappeared from Illinois. A person recognized her, a phone call was made, and the search finally ended. If you want more carefully researched cases, told from verified records rather than rumors or speculation. Subscribe to the silent evidence. Every case deserves an answer. Every family deserves the truth.